The creepy history of Canadian Thanksgiving. Maple leaves, turkey dinners, and cozy fall evenings, that's the image of Canadian Thanksgiving most people picture. But peel back the polite smiles and pumpkin pie, and you'll find something much darker. Because the origins of giving thanks in Canada are soaked in superstition, starvation, and some chilling tales of what happens when gratitude turns to desperation. Let's dig into the eerie, forgotten side of Canadian Thanksgiving, the one they don't mention over dinner. The frozen feast of the Franklin expedition. In 1845, Sir John Franklin led two ships, the Erebus and Terror, on a proud voyage to chart the fabled Northwest Passage. Their mission was celebrated as a triumph of empire and exploration. But by autumn, the Arctic had them in its frozen grip. The ice didn't melt that year, and the men were trapped. Records recovered years later show that, even as their supplies dwindled, the crew tried to keep morale high. They prepared a small Thanksgiving of endurance. The ship's cook thawed the last salted beef, and men passed around tin cups of watered-down rum. They sang hymns and gave thanks for the hope of deliverance, scrawled in one man's journal. It was the last time they wrote anything at all. When rescue teams finally reached the wrecks decades later, they found the remains of crewmen scattered across the tundra. Many bones bore unmistakable cut marks, deliberate, precise. Some skulls had been split open for marrow extraction. The men who once prayed for survival had feasted on each other before succumbing to the cold. Locals in Nunavut say the ice never forgot. Hunters still report hearing faint singing carried across the frozen bays, men's voices harmonizing softly in the wind, as though they're still holding their final Thanksgiving in the dark. The curse of the harvest spirits. Long before Europeans ever declared a day of thanks, First Nations peoples held ceremonies of gratitude. They understood that survival depended on balance, honoring the spirits of the earth, sky, and animals that sustained them. When settlers arrived, many mocked these rituals as superstition. One story from the foothills of Alberta tells of an 1880s homestead near what's now Cochrane. A Cree elder had warned a group of settlers not to disturb a certain patch of land, saying it was sacred to the harvest spirits. But the settlers ignored the warning. They cleared the field, planted barley, and laughed when their neighbor performed his offering, tossing grain into a ceremonial fire. That year, a strange frost hit their land earlier than anyone could remember. Crops turned black overnight. The cattle began bellowing and collapsing in their pens. The settlers, desperate, invited the same elder to bless their home, but by the time he arrived, the family was gone. When searchers entered the farmhouse, they found the table still set for a meal. Plates of half-eaten food. Chairs knocked over. And in the ashes of the hearth, burned to cinders, were what looked like tiny wooden carvings, faces with gaping mouths. Today, ranchers in rural Alberta still leave a small plate of food outside their barns before the first snow. They say it's just tradition. But everyone knows why it started. The plague that ended the feast. In 1872, as settlers prepared for the harvest, Western Canada was struck by a wave of smallpox. It spread silently from fur traders to entire indigenous nations, wiping out villages before winter even began. In Fort Chuapel, Saskatchewan, one missionary wrote that the air was thick with smoke and death. Families burned their own furniture, clothing, even cooking pots, anything that might carry the disease. That autumn, Thanksgiving was officially postponed. But some still gathered quietly to give thanks that they'd survived the first wave. Days later, those same families began to die. Eyewitnesses claimed strange fires burned across the prairie that month, piles of belongings, glowing orange through the night as people tried to cleanse the infection. And amid it all, tables stood abandoned. A traveler's diary described walking into one settlement where plates were laid, meat was carved, and candles still burned beside the dead. Locals later called it the feast that never finished. Even today, in parts of Saskatchewan, farmers say you can still hear coughing on cold harvest nights, the phantom remnants of that cursed Thanksgiving. The Phantom Feast of 1899. In the late 1800s, farmers near Perth, Ontario, began reporting something strange. Every October, on the night of the harvest moon, glowing tables appeared in empty fields, long banquet spreads filled with phantom food. The first man to see it claimed he thought it was a neighbor's prank. But when he got closer, he realized the guests weren't people. They were silhouettes, faint outlines, like smoke given shape, all seated around the table, heads bowed as though saying grace. The air smelled of roasted meat and wine. Then, as he stepped forward, everything vanished, leaving only frost-covered grass and silence. Over the next few years, more witnesses came forward. Some said the apparitions looked like settlers who'd starved during the harsh winter of 1869. Others thought it was the restless dead, still waiting for the feast they never had in life. In 1903, a widowed farmer claimed he followed the lights from his barn and saw his late wife among them, smiling faintly before fading into the mist. He sold his land the next spring and moved away, never celebrating Thanksgiving again. The locals now call that place Ghost Table Fields. And when the moon is right, they say the air still smells faintly of gravy. The turkey that spoke. One old maritime folktale tells of a fisherman and his family preparing for Thanksgiving in the 1860s. They lived near Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, and had little to eat that year, just one large turkey he'd won in a wager. As he sharpened his knife, the bird turned its head toward him and spoke. "Do not carve what you cannot return." Terrified, the man struck anyway, certain he'd imagined it. That night, they roasted the bird and ate in silence. Within a week, one child fell ill. Then another. By Christmas, the whole family was dead. Neighbors refused to enter the house. They claimed the windows sometimes fogged from the inside, as though someone, or something, was still breathing in there. Years later, when the property was torn down, workers unearthed a smooth, reddish stone near the hearth. It looked uncannily like a turkey's head, beak open, mouth frozen mid-scream. Some say it's nonsense, just a folk tale. But in Yarmouth, they still tell it around the fire every Thanksgiving, and no one dares cook a bird alone. So the next time you're slicing turkey and passing the gravy, maybe think twice about where those traditions came from. Canadian Thanksgiving isn't just about gratitude and harvest, it's also about ghosts, curses, and forgotten feasts best left in the dark. Which of these tales do you think was fake? Leave your guess in the comments, and if you enjoyed this dark slice of history, be sure to like, subscribe, and come back for another helping of IYCBEJE Presents Creepy History. Because sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried under the frost.